5. True Horror Street Ori's Compilation. Late October 2022. A storm loomed over Elk Ridge, a wooded town tucked between the fog-heavy hills of northern Oregon. At dusk, 5 college friends crossed into Black Hollow, abandoned mining camp, sealed since 1951. Mara, a curious girl with shoulder-length blonde hair and a restless stare, had grown obsessed with the area's silence. She brought her friends, Reed, logical and quiet, always with a notebook; Tessa, bold and sarcastic, hiding her nerves behind jokes; Isaac, upbeat but strangely sensitive to sounds; and Lena, thoughtful, often watching more than speaking. Black Hollow felt wrong from the start. The wind died as they passed the rusted gate. The trees thinned unnaturally around the collapsed buildings. Old lanterns still hung from crooked posts, unlit but recently cleaned. Tessa joked it felt staged. No one laughed. They heard metal scraping behind the general store. Isaac turned first. He swore he saw someone standing just beyond the trees. A tall figure, heavy cloak, iron mask. The others saw nothing. But Reed noticed the ground had fresh prints, heavy ones, dragging 1 foot. Mara found the journal in the sheriff's office. Pages warned of a masked man who returned every year, always in fog. She read aloud until Reed stopped her. Something was watching from the dark beyond the windows, breathing slowly. That night, their paths changed. The main trail curved in new directions. Isaac vanished near the collapsed mine entrance after hearing whispers underground. Tessa was the first to panic. She ran. They followed but met him. The masked man stood still, his frame almost statuesque. His mask was rusted, split at the mouth. His cloak dragged as he turned. He didn't chase. He simply moved toward them. Every time they blinked, he was closer. By sunrise, only Mara, Reed, and Lena reached the edge of the woods. Tessa and Isaac were gone. Their voices still echoed faintly behind the trees, like recordings from a broken speaker. Some places are meant to be left buried. Some echoes don't fade, they follow. Mara doesn't return to Elk Ridge, but she still hears him breathing. And his mask is no longer where they last saw it. 2 weeks later, just outside Bend, Oregon, the storm hadn't left. Rain clung to the windows of the motel where Mara, Reed, and Lena were hiding. The news called the Elk Ridge disappearances a hoax. No one believed them, but they knew what they saw. Mara hadn't slept since that night. She heard footsteps behind closed doors. Reed found dustless spots in every room they stayed in. Lena started drawing the masked man over and over without realizing. None of them talked about it, but they all knew something followed them out of Black Hollow. Reed insisted they find answers. He tracked down local archives and discovered something strange. Black Hollow was built over an older settlement from the 1800s called Ashevale. The records vanished after 1894. That's when the first sightings of the masked figure began. A journal from a miner mentioned him a man who never spoke, only stared, always in rain. They drove to where Ashevale once stood. A private estate now occupied the land, empty. Locked gates, security cameras, but no one lived there. At midnight, the gates opened on their own. Reed didn't hesitate. Mara didn't want to go in, but something about the place pulled her forward. Lena followed, silent, still sketching. Inside, time shifted. The air pressed down on their skin. The trees looked frozen mid-motion. Shadows didn't match the light. Then they heard it. The sound of metal dragging. Slow. Measured. Reed froze. The masked figure stepped from between 2 trees. Closer now than ever. He didn't run. He simply watched. The iron mask looked wet. His cloak dragged leaves behind him, even where there were none. Reed stepped forward, asking what he was. The figure tilted his head slowly, then raised one arm. All 3 dropped to the ground as a low vibration filled the air, a hum, like metal being bent deep underground. The ground opened behind them, not a hole, but a thin, perfect crack. Mara grabbed Reed. Lena didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the figure. her sketches dropping from her hands. Each one matched the real thing, no differences, as if she had drawn him in real time. The masked man took a step toward her. Lena finally blinked and vanished, not faded, gone. Mara screamed. Reed pulled her back. The figure didn't chase. He turned and walked into the woods. The crack sealed behind him. They returned to the motel with only Lena's book. Every page had changed. Now it showed events they hadn't experienced. One image showed Mara standing alone in a room full of masks. Another showed Reed, kneeling, eyes black. The final one was blank, but the corners of the page were stained, like someone had held it with damp gloves. Reed wanted to burn the book. Mara kept it. She believed it showed what was coming. That night, the motel's hallway grew longer. The clock blinked, 3:33. All the lights went off. Mara sat by the window. Outside, in the parking lot, the masked figure stood under the flickering street lamp, not moving, just watching. Some doors, once opened, never fully close. Some things follow, not to haunt but to become. And somewhere inside Mara, she knew Lena hadn't been taken. She had been chosen. The masked figure does not sleep. He only waits. And he's closer now than before. Late October, cold winds swept through the small mountain town of Florence, Oregon. Mara and Reed arrived just after dusk, carrying only one bag and a journal wrapped in plastic. It had been 4 nights since Lena disappeared. Since then, the masked figure returned every night, always at 3:33, always watching. They fled east, then south, but he followed. Not in the way a person does. His presence bled through walls, through time. Florence was chosen for a reason. Years ago, Reed's aunt vanished here under similar circumstances. No one connected it until they saw an old photo tucked into the back of the journal. A woman in a wide-brim hat, standing before a twisted pine. Behind her, a shape blurred in shadow, a shape wearing an iron mask. They rented a small cabin in the woods, off-grid, no cameras, no cell towers. Reed believed isolation might disrupt the entity. Mara doubted it, but followed anyway. She was changing. Her reflection flickered, her thoughts split. Sometimes she heard whispers from pages that hadn't been written. That night, they set traps, cameras, chalk lines, salt rings, anything from books or stories. They didn't know what worked. They only knew what didn't. He still came. At 3:33, the air inside the cabin thickened. The fire dimmed. The sound of dragging metal echoed beneath the floorboards. Mara turned to the window. There he was, closer than ever. This time, the mask had changed. It was cracked down the center, revealing the hint of a mouth behind it. Something not human. It didn't move, yet the trees behind it twisted, as if leaning away. Suddenly, every light went out. The chalk lines dissolved. The salt turned black. Reed reached for the journal, but it had opened itself. Pages flipped faster than the wind could turn them. Images of the cabin, drawn in black ink. One image showed Mara standing alone. Another, Reed with no face. Then came the sound. Not metal this time. Breathing. Slow. Deep. Not coming from outside, but from the crawl space beneath the cabin. Reed opened the hatch. Empty. Dust. Cobwebs. Then a single knock echoed through the boards. Deliberate. Rhythmic. 3 knocks. A pause. Then 3 more. Reed closed the hatch. Mara screamed. The masked figure stood inside now, in the corner of the room, though neither saw him enter. He didn't move. His cloak dragged across the floor without sound. Reed stepped between Mara and the figure, hands shaking. The figure raised one hand and pointed at Mara. The walls of the cabin cracked. The ceiling bulged. Then the journal burst into flame, pages curling into ash. Mara collapsed. Her eyes turned white for seconds, then flickered back. She whispered a name they'd never heard, a name that wasn't hers. Reed dragged her outside. The trees were no longer trees. They bent into arches. The ground beneath them pulsed. Time stuttered. Stars blinked on and off above. The masked figure followed, but not with steps. He flickered forward, his cloak unraveling at the ends into smoke. Mara came to, gasping. She said he was trying to show her something, that the name she spoke was his. He had once been human, long ago, buried alive during a failed ritual, bound to silence, bound to masks. Every victim he took became a part of his face, every soul trapped, a voice stolen, but he was no longer taking. He was building. They escaped into the woods. The figure didn't pursue, only watched from between warped pine trunks. The last thing they saw before the night swallowed him was his mask splitting further, revealing another eye underneath. By dawn, they were miles away, but the journal, burned to ash, had returned to Mara's backpack, rewritten, a new page, a new sketch. Mara standing at the foot of a twisted pine, mask in hand. Reed nowhere in sight. He doesn't haunt places. He inhabits people, and once chosen, the mask never leaves your mind. The storm is no longer outside. It has learned to speak, and tonight, it speaks your name. Late November, in the hills above Eureka, California, the fog never lifted. For 2 days, Mara and Reed followed old forestry trails, guided by the rewritten journal. Their destination was an abandoned ranger outpost, marked in faded red ink. The journal claimed the figure had once been sealed beneath the outpost, before the binding failed. That was where the name first vanished. That was where the earth cracked open. They reached the cabin just before nightfall. Weather-beaten and overgrown, it leaned like something trying to crawl away. Inside, the air was heavier, as if it had not been touched in years. Yet the fireplace was warm. The chair rocked slowly. On the table, a fresh drawing of Mara. This time, her eyes were not her own. Reed wanted to burn the journal, again. But Mara had changed. Her hands trembled when she touched it, not from fear, but connection. She remembered dreams she never had. Words she never learned now filled her mouth in whispers. The mask wasn't following, it was pulling, drawing them back. At 3:33, as always, he returned. The sound came first. Chains dragging across timber, distant at first, then closer than the walls allowed. Reed bolted the doors, covered mirrors. The figure walked past the window, then appeared inside, where the shadows shouldn't have reached. His iron mask gleamed with firelight. His cloak, still tattered, seemed deeper now, like it swallowed space. He raised his arm. The air shifted. Reed froze mid-breath, time locked. Mara stood unaffected, staring directly at him. He spoke to her, not in sound, but through every object in the room wood creaking, fire snapping, water dripping. Together, they formed words only she understood. He showed her a memory, not her own. A circle of masked figures, a ritual undone, a mistake that created him. Reed broke the moment by smashing the window. The cold air broke the spell. Time resumed. The figure vanished. But the journal wrote on. Reed screamed. The ink carved itself onto his arm, branding him with symbols they couldn't read. Later, they found the trap door under the rug. Inside, stairs, old, rotted wood that led down into dark carved stone. No flashlight worked. Only Mara could see. She descended first. Reed followed, walls closed behind them. At the bottom was a single mask, not iron, but wood, old, broken, with 2 eye holes, one filled in with wax. It was his first mask. And Mara touched it. Her eyes rolled back. She gasped. She saw through him saw, every place he had walked, every soul he had taken, not to torment, to build, a form, a mouth, a way to return. When she awoke, she whispered again, a place, a name, and this time, she didn't sound like herself.